Judge Arthur Engeron, who's presiding over former President Trump's fraud trial in New York, issued a limited gag order for all parties. The motion follows a post Trump made on Truth Social during the trial on Tuesday, targeting Engeron's clerk, claiming she's Senator Chuck Schumer's girlfriend. Trump's campaign team also blasted out an email during their lunch break, tearing into Engeron.
Hosts of The View appeared to have a field day after the gag order was issued. Whoopi Goldberg, no surprise, expressed her frustration at the former president that has gotten away with threatening officials involved. Let's take a look.
Why can he continue to threaten judges, threaten AGs, and threaten just people? Now, I understand that some folks say it's freedom of speech, but if I did that, right, they would not consider it freedom of speech.
She likened Trump's lashing out to his role in January 6th. Meanwhile, co-host Sunny Hostin said she's hiding behind the First Amendment and attributed his behavior to the need to appeal to his base. Let's take a look.
The reason that he keeps on doing this is because it fires up his base. But most importantly, the reason he even showed up at this is because this threatens everything about his alleged empire, which he doesn't really have, we all know. But she's asking for $250 million. He's not going to serve any jail time or anything like that, but he will lose all of his business certificates in New York. He's already lost those, actually, believe it or not.
But, you know, so
it's a lot of money.
First and foremost, what do you make of the nature of Trump's provocations against previously kind of the judge and now the clerk specifically that's resulted in these gag orders? Do you think it is overstepping of his free speech rights, the way that many on the right have argued?
Yeah.
Or is this something that, you know, is a consistent legal principle that you can't threaten or coerce officers of the court, and Donald Trump just needs to maybe log off?
I mean, I think he should have freedom of speech. I mean, this isn't a trial by jury. The judge is making this decision. So it's not like his statements are going to somehow sway a potential jury pool.
Well, it's about threat. I mean, I think the argument is that you are potentially harassing, threatening, and coercing the staff to give you a more favorable outcome by threatening their person.
I don't personally, this isn't about whether I like or dislike Donald Trump. I don't agree with that. I mean, if I'm going through a trial and I say I do not like this judge, I think this judge is terrible, that doesn't mean that I'm trying to coerce the judge to rule one way or the other. I'm just making an example, Bree, that's not necessarily indicative of trying to sway the judge one way or the other.
Is what Donald Trump said inappropriate, the kind of thing I think that in ordinary course would be considered contempt of court or sanctioned in some other way? I mean, my struggle with this is that, one, it's a very easy thing just to not do, even if you think you're being politically prosecuted. Sure. Don't tweet that the clerk, the court clerk is Chuck Schumer's girlfriend. Like, what?
Who's that threatening, though? I mean, who's that threatening?
There have been, I'm sorry, there was just an instance of a man going to Barack Obama's house with a gun who was arrested after Donald Trump tweeted the address to his Kalorama house out. I mean, like, you can say that it's not his fault, but there has been more than one example of Donald Trump and the people around him making statements, agitated, angry statements, even if they're not expressly telling anybody to do anything, that have led to people being the targets of his followers.
No, I just think not even as a conservative.
He had to pay a lawsuit, I'm sorry, about those two election workers
just as an
in
American,
Georgia
Bree,
because they were so harassed and had to move because of the kinds of things he was tweeting about them.
And as well as Rudy Giuliani, if I recall correctly, the two Georgia.
Yes.
I know exactly what you're talking about. And I understand that particular case. But we do have to be very careful, Bree, in limiting one's right to freedom of speech. Now, I know one could argue, whether the Supreme Court has already argued that freedom of speech isn't completely unlimited, like you can't yell fire, et cetera, et cetera. We know those things. But how far do you limit a former president who's now running for public office's ability to sort of talk about what he's experiencing through the guise of politics? Where is that limitation? And I just think we have to be careful there. So I'm not saying I agree or disagree with Trump, but I do believe in the preservation of freedom of speech. And I think from the perspective of a lot of Republican voters, they already view this as being overly politicized. And now the gag order, they believe, limits Trump's ability to criticize the process and the individuals involved in the process.
Is tweeting the untrue statement that a member of the court staff was Chuck Schumer's girlfriend a part of Donald Trump's defense in that case, a part of the political process.
Donald Trump's defense of the case will be handled during the trial by his attorneys. Donald Trump still should have the right to speak his mind. And censoring his ability to do so from the perspective of a lot of Republican voters will be viewed as trying to discourage him from being able to share what his thoughts are on what he's experiencing, thus limiting his freedom of speech.
I think that Donald Trump can say, I don't like how I'm being treated in court. I think he can say, I think there's bias, the clerk is biased, or whatever he wants to say based on, apparently he was upset that she was whispering to the judge.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. I've clerked for federal district court. Sometimes you talk to the judge. I know this isn't his first time in court, so I don't know why he's surprised by this.
I'm not saying that I would advise the former president to tweet this stuff. I'd probably say, Mr. President, look, we need to be careful with this. This is already against us as it is. Let's not make the process worse. But I'm just purely looking at this through the guise of politics, and I just think a lot of his supporters will see this as an attempt to limit the former president's freedom of speech.
What do you make of the ladies of The View's take?
It's The View. It's a liberal show. They don't like Donald Trump, even if he did something right. Any Republican, for that matter. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I think that's true. But also, I'm sorry, at a certain point, Donald Trump has to get out of his own way. I mean, we experienced, I think, a little bit of this exhaustion around the documents case. It did seem for that one that even his supporters became frustrated that he made it so difficult to defend him. First, they asked for the documents back. He declined. If he had just given them back, he would have been in the same position as Biden and Clinton and a bunch of other people who also have taken documents that they weren't supposed to take. But not only did he spend like a year ignoring those requests to return the documents, trying to move the documents from room to room to hide the documents.
Some, but not all of them.
Returning some, but not all the documents.
Yeah.
He then was caught on tape bragging about how he knew the documents that he had were confidential. And honestly, it's unfortunate for his supporters who shouldn't have to be in the position of defending silly stuff.
This is the frustration, Bree, that comes even with like the ardent Trump supporters. When I travel the country, they do get frustrated by stuff like this. It's like there are a lot of things you can make the case on right now against Joe Biden and Democrats that, for the most part, the American people would be somewhat open to. But when people turn on the news every single day and they see you complaining about all these different court trials and you're attacking the judge, you're attacking the people who are part of the process, even if it is your freedom of speech, if I were advising the former president, I would say, let's flip this and talk about the economy. Let's flip this and talk about the money going to Ukraine. Let's flip this and talk about immigration, which is what people actually really care about versus these things. But, Trump is going to be Trump.
I tend to agree. All right, stick around. Stay with us. More Rising right after this.